I'm going to be talking to Salim Youssefzadeh, who is the CEO of California-based WattEV, about a very unique business model in the electric transportation sector, truck as a service or trucking as a service. So welcome to the interview, Salim.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're seeing this more and more in niche markets around transportation, this as a service business model. Can you tell us about yours, please?
Sure. So WattEV started about 2 years ago, and our mission is to really accelerate the transition to electric heavy-duty trucking. When we first started, we wanted to become the dominant player in infrastructure. So we started off with the idea of building publicly available electric truck stops. But as we went on with that, we realized very quickly that it's not enough to just build and expect that demand to pick up naturally. That's when we really started looking at the electric trucks, what currently exists today in the market, where the prices are and so forth, and noticed that there's a big gap between where it exists today and where it should be in order to be at par with diesel. And that's where we came up with this truck as a service concept that allows us to bring in these trucks on sort of a service model, all inclusive of the vehicle, the maintenance, plus the fuel being the energy at a cost that's nearly at par with diesel.
Right. And we should mention that you've just bought 50 Volvo Class 8 trucks. So these are semi trucks.
Correct.
And so you basically the shipper, the carrier contracts for X price per mile, and that's what they pay, and you look after the rest.
Yeah, so if you compare it to the traditional diesel operations, most of your costs comes down to total cost of ownership. And total cost of ownership is made up of the truck lease or financing, maintenance, insurance, registration, and fuel. In our model, it's very similar. The truck obviously is going to be a lot more expensive for us, but the maintenance we anticipate being lower on a long-term basis. And then the fuel is significantly cheaper as well, especially now with raising diesel prices. But the way that we're actually able to bring the total cost of ownership down to something that's nearly at par with diesel is to get more miles driven on the truck. So the more miles driven, the lower the total cost of ownership becomes for that operator.
Right. It sounds like we've seen this in levelized cost of driving estimates for electric versus internal combustion engine. And the more you drive it, the cheaper it is per mile per kilometer. Now, I'm going to guess here, Salim, that when anytime a new technology comes in, there's always risk attached to it. You know, unfamiliarity, risk of failure, that sort of thing. And it sounds like one of the benefits of your model is that it de-risks the transition to electric trucking for carriers who are just beginning to make the change. Would that be a fair observation?
That's exactly correct. From the shipper's point of view, like the larger companies, they may not want to take the risk of building out the infrastructure at their facility themselves. And they have a new number of unknowns in terms of where they're going to charge if they go beyond the radius of the mileage of the trucks. And then there's the owner operators and carriers and the truck drivers that don't necessarily have the capital to get into electric transport. And they themselves also don't know about the unknowns in terms of the charging, the range, and so forth. So our model completely removes the risks. We match drivers with the routes that we know work with the constraints of the vehicles and the constraints of our network. As we start growing those out, then obviously the range and the network expands as well.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that? Now you're starting with California, the Port of Long Beach, Los Angeles, the Inland Empire, so all around the San Joaquin Valley. So it's all around Los Angeles to start. I guess that makes a lot of sense. I've been down in that Long Beach port. It's busy. There's a lot of activity going there.
I believe 30% of the U.S.'s transport comes from Port of Long Beach and LA. So a tremendous amount of freight is coming through here. Our office overlooks the port, so we're able to see just how large the supply chain constraints are and how many containers are coming in. But really, we're starting with California for a number of reasons. For one, there's the mandates and incentives that are encouraging the shippers and the owner operators to start looking at zero emissions technology for transportation. And that allows us to really take advantage of those opportunities that exist to reduce the capital costs in terms of the infrastructure deployment, as well as on the assets themselves being the trucks.
Right. And what's been the response so far from the trucking companies, the carriers? Are they enthusiastic about this?
Absolutely. They all really want to get into this industry. I mean, we've talked to a number of drivers that have had the opportunity to drive electric trucks. They all love it. I mean, for a number of reasons. It's no noise, instant acceleration and torque. It's easier on the body because you have less vibration. So they feel that they can go longer without getting tired. And they're all very receptive of having access to these trucks at a cost that's at par with diesel, and simplifies the solution for them and allows them to get access to zero emissions transport.
I want to run a little hypothesis past you, Salim. I argue that electric vehicles are often adopted. First, there's the cost. Fair enough, per mile per kilometer, up your upfront capital cost. But then there's value. And when you mentioned, for a driver who doesn't have that vibration, it's a more comfortable drive, they can drive longer. That seems to be the one of a value add that comes along with electric. That and how much are there others those kind of value propositions, and how important is that in the adoption of electric by the carriers and the response from the drivers?
Sure. I mean, there's a number of value adds to the shippers. They can now meet their sustainability goals with no upfront cost. So essentially, the routes that they contract out on, whether it's the spot market on contracts, they can offload that onto our platform, and we would facilitate those routes using zero emissions transport. So instantly, they've met their sustainability goals with very little risk to themselves. On the owner operators and carriers side, they can now join our platform, know exactly what the routes are, what the transport are, what the capabilities of the vehicles are, and they don't have to worry about the maintenance. They don't have to worry about the capital that goes into it, or the fuel being the energy that goes into it. So it's completely de-risked it for both the shippers and the carriers, and makes it zero emissions transport a reality for both the transporters and the owner operators and shippers.
Now, I understand you're also going to be constructing some public truck charging depots, Bakersfield, San Bernardino, near the port of Long Beach. Are those for everybody, or are those just for your
Yeah,
trucks?
so all of these stations that we're building out are publicly available stations. We started with construction of those 4 sites that will be operational by the end of this year. So we've got Bakersfield, which is actually a 115-acre property, of which 100 acres is going to be all solar by the full scale, which would allow us for 40 megawatts of solar, which equates to about 200 trucks charging per day. By the end of this year, we'll have 5 megawatts of solar, as well as some battery storage, and well over 20 CCS chargers that equates to charging about 60 vehicles per day. And then obviously we're not going to have access to properties that large wherever we can. So San Bernardino, Long Beach, Gardena, those are smaller sites that will be mostly tied to the utilities. But all of the sites have been awarded some sort of grant funding, whether it's federal or state, which allows us to reduce some of that capital cost that goes into it. And we have a pipeline of sites that are going well beyond the 4 that we have under construction, going all the way up to Northern California, as well as eastbound to the East Coast states, as well as Nevada and New Mexico and so forth.
Salim, there's a lot of chatter about where the cost of battery electric trucks is going, and can it be reduced? Will some of the new battery chemistries, maybe battery improvements, raise the energy density and the range? What's your take on that? What are we going to see over the next, or what are you anticipating over the next 2 to 5 years?
Sure. So first and foremost, the most expensive part of the truck is definitely the batteries. These trucks are, in some cases, 4 times that of a new diesel truck, which is enough to scare away a lot of people from entering this business. But we can reduce that price through the various grants and incentives we get. But obviously, you can't base that, and that's not scalable. You can't assume that those funding opportunities are going to be available forever. Also, on the technology of the trucks, well, the trucks that exist today have CCS chargers, which is the most widely used standard right now, with a 250 kilowatt charge rate, which equates to about a 2 to 3 hour charge time on a roughly 450 kilowatt hour battery. And that gives us about a 275 mile range. Now, in terms of where the technology is going, there's different organizations that are working on new standards. Charin is one of those that's developing the MCS standard, which is megawatt charging, which greatly reduces the charge time to about 30 to 45 minutes. And then on the battery side, we're seeing different chemistries going into them, different cooling technologies and so forth that allows for that rapid charge time. And then as you have economies of scale, as more of these vehicles are produced, we also see the cost coming down long term.
Well, it's very interesting. It sounds like this lots of opportunity for you to expand. And I would assume that you plan to take this model outside of California at some point.
Absolutely. And again, that's where the model that we've created really comes into play. I mean, with the current generation of trucks that we have in order, we see that you can't have a driver sit 2 to 3 hours to charge a truck. At the end of the day, time is money for them, and they can't afford to just sit there and wait. So in our model, we've sort of adopted a Pony Express model, where a driver, for instance, picking up a truck at our Bakersfield facility, can take a load using drop and hook, drive it down to San Bernardino. At that point, the truck is nearly out of charge. You'll go to our San Bernardino facility, pick up a fully charged truck, and then facilitate the next route. So really, this becomes more of an optimization problem, an asset problem on where we manage our assets, how we match the routes, how we match the schedules, so that those trucks are still utilized as much as possible per day to bring down that total cost of ownership. And then on the other side, we're expanding from the short haul model or the return to base model to a long haul freight using this Pony Express, where if we have stations that go all the way from Southern California to Northern California, they can just use that relay system to constantly swap out the trucks rather than waiting that 2 to 3 hours to charge.
Well, very interesting business model. Good luck with it. And thank you very much for this, Salim.